Welcome back into Room 442, the week that was. A very smooth news segment, no technical issues here whatsoever, I can assure you that much. It was quite the week though, wasn't it? Transfer deadline, British transfer records, Keylor Navas to the Premier League, and then Sean Johnson unveiled at Toronto FC. But I think for us Canadian football fans, the story that stole the headlines was John Herdman. This non-story that happened on Wednesday. Some broadcasters out there spent a long time writing scripts, shooting conversations, all of which went down the toilet, the proverbial toilet, because John Herdman's staying with Canada Soccer. Albert, though, would you say Canada Soccer is at a more stable place now than it was, say, on Tuesday?
I don't think so. I want to say that because I want everything to be okay with Canada and everything to be settled heading into, the Gold Cup this year and potentially Copa America and the World Cup. You want them to kind of have their bases covered and everyone be on the same page. But it doesn't feel that way. With John Herdman, it obviously a manager of his quality is going to be courted by other clubs and other nations. That just comes with the territory. It's just maybe the way that it kind of happened leaves me a bit uneasy, because you would feel that maybe these types of stories would be held down by the CSA, but clearly that's not the case. And it could be Herdman maybe, trying to up his contract or get more money or more power, whatever the case may be. But do I think they're in a better place now? Not necessarily.
Now, he signed a new deal after qualifying before the World Cup. But these things, like I mentioned, they do happen in professional sports. We understand that. Was the surprise, though, not so much that he might leave, but that it was New Zealand being either the team leveraged in his benefit or where the story broke? Because to me, I'm sorry, with respect to New Zealand, that's a massive step backwards from Canadian football.
Yeah, just from the outside looking in, seeing how the way that this story played out, this story didn't leak from John Herdman. This story leaked from New Zealand's side of things.
Yeah.
And I believe John Herdman when he says he had multiple offers on the table and he's turned them all down, including this New Zealand job. So to go back to your original question, do I feel better now as opposed to the beginning of the week? I do, because there's more clarity now in terms of John Herdman's stance, right? He's said in the past that he wants to remain the coach of Canada. There's a long project, but he hasn't definitively said it in a way that we saw this past week. So now that he's come out and said his goal is 2026, of course, I'm interested in what the other offers were it's anything really intriguing enough for him to leave, and he is really loyal to Canada by turning down those offers, or were the offers just not good enough, like in New Zealand? So yeah, we'll see how this plays out throughout the rest of this year, but I think it's a good sign that they've come out and poured cold water on this.
You got to figure, though, that there weren't too many big offers on the table, right, Sarah? I mean, if New Zealand's the one that leaked the story, or someone within New Zealand football or the media discovered this, to me that strikes me as being, quite low in the totem pole. We know how the British media works, for example, and we discussed, would a British club come sniffing around John Herdman, and would he jump at that point? We would probably have heard something about it, but there was nothing. It was like silence from the World Cup onwards until Wednesday morning.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he missed the shot at Everton, but I
Oh, did he? Yeah. Dodge the bullet, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, still, I think at Everton, it's still a massive upgrade from a team like New Zealand, even if they go to the
from Canada, let's be honest.
Yeah, no, 100%. So either way, I'm assuming he would have taken a job like that. But yeah, you have to assume that there's not much else going on if that's what we're hearing in the news, which maybe means that he's here until 2026, and maybe that's exactly what he wants, so he can put all of his time and effort into Canada and just focus on that, which is what the team needs.
Will he be here in 2026, do you think? I mean, he says he will, all right? And at this point, there's no reason to think otherwise, but there's a lot of football between now and then. Gold Cup, Copa America, like you mentioned there. Good performances. The stock rises.
That would be the thing. That would be what would keep him, I think. There's so much to look forward to. Canada are potentially going to play the likes of a ton of South American teams, Gold Cup, and then a home World Cup. This is probably the time right now to be a North American coach. So, especially with so many young players on this Canadian side, I think that he'd almost be a little silly, and this is only unless he gets an insane offer from like a really outstanding club or just a higher level club. I can't see him leaving now because there's so much to look forward to in Canadian football, at least until 2026.
You see the offers that the U.S. federation is reportedly putting out there, like the Zinedine Zidanes and Jose Mourinho, and the latest one is Marcelo Bielsa. So that's the type of profile a team like US is going after. That's how coveted I think these types of positions are, because they genuinely believe with a home World Cup they can get a manager of sort of that stature. We'll see what exactly plays out there with the US, but to Sarah's point, like, this is a coveted role, being the head coach of Canada right now, and the only way he really leaves is for job security and, like Sarah said, a sure upgrade.
Or if performances go down.
Yeah, that's
Right?
a fair shout.
Right.
They have a bad Gold Cup. They have a real bad Copa, right? We keep talking about all the power being in John Herdman's seat. Let's not forget that this is football, and form can change very quickly. This team crashes out in the first round of the Gold Cup next year, or this summer.
Yeah.
It all changes, right?
Yeah, we just don't know also how organized the CSA is behind the scenes. That can play a huge factor into what's going on. And back to what Mikey was saying about those managers, quote unquote, being linked, or what they're looking for. I think USA has a lot more pull than Canada because they've had so much more success. And I think they, at the moment, in terms of their entire club, maybe more high-profile players than Canada. If Canada can pull that type of manager, I mean, it wouldn't be that much of an issue to let John Herdman go. I just don't know who the next man is if he's gone, or woman.
The USA has a lot more spending power too.
Yeah.
Right. They can destroy. If you've got a bidding war for one guy, Canada and USA, there's no competition there, right? They can give a manager whatever he wants.
Right.
Canada cannot do that. As much as John Herbert's on good money for a Canadian coach, you can't do that. So it's going to be an interesting few months still. But I'm grateful that things have cleared up. I know Canada Soccer I wouldn't call it house clearing per se, but there are changes at the top right now. Sandra Gage, a long time servant of Canada Soccer, left this week. Are there more on the way? Well, who knows? But there are changes there. And Earl Cochrane said that last year, taking a close forensic look at the way we do things. So that's interesting. Premier League spending, it's pretty high. The transfer window closed earlier this week, and by the end of it, Premier League clubs had destroyed all of Europe. Look at the total spending in January of this year. Not so much the figure. I mean, the figure, I don't even know what those figures mean. 930 million euros. I mean, to me, that's monopoly money. But how it compares to the rest of the big clubs and big leagues in Europe, Liga, 110 million pounds, 60 for the Bundesliga. Look at your La Liga there, Sarah, 30 million euros. Not even a player these days. Can this be sustainable, do you think?
I mean, if Real Madrid go on and win the Champions League, they're laughing. And also Barcelona's still in the Europa League. Imagine if those two, or even if a Spanish team win Europa League and Real wins the Champions League, I'm laughing because it's so different, the amount of money they're spending. Like, it's insane. It's insane.
You subtract Chelsea from those figures, does it look a little bit more
Well,
real?
yeah, a third of it was Chelsea, right? In fairness, that's a good point.
At least, I'd say more than half of it's probably Chelsea with the amount that they spent.
Yeah.
Didn't
Well,
Chelsea
from last
spend like
summer, for
550?
sure.
It's up there,
From
yeah.
last summer.
So that was 870?
I think it's 25% of Premier League spend was Chelsea.
Yeah, this whole season, right?
Yeah.
From summer to January. Yeah, you say it's insane, but is it insane? You have these oil states that now own clubs. You have the American invasion. These owners now that see football as entertainment, and they don't mind paying these players who are really their actors in this new Hollywoodization.
Hollywoodization.
This new word I just came up with.
Okay.
But they can afford it with the TV deals coming through, right? So is it insane? I mean, this bubble that's going to burst, we've been hearing about for the last, since the Premier League was born back in 92, 93, right? But it's still here.
I think that bubble is going to get pretty big by the time it bursts. It's hard to know if it's going to be sustainable, but like you said, with that type of ownership, they have unlimited spending, the deepest pockets possible. And what is it, James, if you say in the Premier League, each team gets 100 million from revenue?
More than that, yeah.
Yeah, so
With parachute payments guaranteed if you go down.
The likes of Brentford and teams that finish at the bottom, near the bottom of the table, they're still making more money than a lot of clubs in some of these other leagues. So is it sustainable? I think for the time being, yes. But the problem with this type of spending, especially with Chelsea, they're going to blow up the market so much where you're not going to be able to afford anybody.
Right.
That was some Brentford slander, by the way.
I love Brentford.
That was some Brentford slander.
Well, I mentioned before, earlier today, Bournemouth are spending 70 million in a window.
They're in a relegation
Southampton, I think 45 million or thereabouts. These are smaller clubs now
What about
spending.
Forest?
Yeah, look at Forest, right? I mean, Forest signed Keylor Navas, which I just love. It just seems weird.
And
doesn't it?
Andre Ayew, get some love to Ayew.
Sorry, I forgot about that. Yeah, is that finalized, by the way?
Apparently it is.
29 new signings
He's a free agent.
for Forest.
Yeah, you know what?
29.
It's crazy. You mentioned Keylor Navas there in particular, and had it not been for the World Cup, I would have completely forgot he was playing at PSG because he's just never gone any sort of spot. This was one of the best goalkeepers in the world, and went to PSG and had his job essentially taken by Gianluca Donnarumma.
Who hasn't done a great job, by the way. I feel like Keylor Navas is one of those players who got treated like real bad by Real Madrid. They kind of just left him, and he was doing a great job there. Went to PSG, started off well, but then they brought Donnarumma, who's not been fantastic, and now he's out the door to Nottingham. Okay, maybe that means he's starting every game and playing every game, but Nottingham. I think Keylor Navas is a much better goalie than being a Nottingham
European
keeper.
champions back in the early 80s.
Come
Thank you
on.
very much.
When Keylor Navas was born.
He's also going to get paid. And just back
Yeah.
to Forrest and this type of spending in the Premier League. By bringing in 29 players, it shows you how desperate teams are to stay in the Premier League and receive that type of money, that TV revenue. It's so important, and it's so attractive to players right now to play in the Premier League.
Yeah, precisely, and there's more money coming as well. They rolled the contracts through because of COVID, and they just equal what they previously made domestically. When the new deal comes up for 10, when is that? 2 years now, I think it is. It's going to be even greater and well over $1 billion. It's just crazy
And
money.
Bowley suggested that this spending is going to continue the next 2 windows. They're not done.
Yeah, although UEFA have gotten some new rules in place now,
Yeah.
right? 5-year contract amortization compared to the 8.5, 9 years they've been doing
Chelsea
right now.
rule, we should call it.
Well, actually, Jurgen Klopp was asked about this, right? And Klopp's response to Chelsea spending was, I'll say nothing without my lawyer. Love the humor. They said, I don't understand this part of the business. It's a big number. They're all really good players, so congratulations. I don't understand how it's possible, but it's not for me to explain. Little dig there at Chelsea. 'Cause
I
right
think
now,
everyone's
big
wondering the
rivals.
same thing, right?
Yeah, Pep
How are
said
they
something
doing
similar
this?
too, right? He goes, I don't want to comment on it, but then he said, let's not forget that, people and teams wanted us banned for making such transfers.
Yeah, exactly. Hypocrites, right? Hypocrites. But the fans don't care. Just want to see the best players, the best football. And right now, the Premier League's offering the best players and the best football, right? And I understand why La Liga's upset and Serie A's upset, but they had their chance too. They didn't jump at it, and the Premier League did all those years ago. So, cry me a river. Sorry, Sarah.
I'm not sorry. It's
Just
still
stayed
great.
there.
Look at Napoli this season. It's been fantastic. I can't complain with Serie A or La Liga at all.
It does make for better stories, right? When
It
you,
does.
You do see teams that
Like
sell a lot of
Juve's
players.
now, like they drop 15 points. The drama's here, and
I'm
I'm
not. Once upon a time,
staying.
Napoli could afford a Maradona, and English teams couldn't afford a Maradona.
Yeah,
right?
no,
I'm not
it's-
convinced a Premier League team win anything in Europe.
Yeah.
They should win it every year, theoretically, with the
Yeah.
amount that they
Maybe.
spend, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, PSG should win it every year as well.
They
It
should.
doesn't happen that way, right? Simple as that. TFC are trying their mightiest to try and sign the best players to win a championship again. Sean Johnson arrives this week. Obviously, a great resume. He's been there, done it. We're at the press conference this week, of course. Speaks really, really well. I think from a TFC perspective, it's pretty exciting, Mikey, right now, because not everything's in place just yet.
You know what was really exciting? Seeing you get a question in to Sean Johnson.
I got a
That was
couple, didn't I?
That was a little throwback, Sean.
Yeah,
getting
I
back
don't do
out
too many
there.
presses these days, but I'm going to make an effort this year to get back on the TFC. When I see the beat, that's your job, but to be more visible there.
No, I loved it, and it was a great question that you asked. It was about essentially how he's going to implement himself within this TFC dressing room with a lot of big personalities. And that's what stood out to me, and that's why I'm so excited. The one thing about Alex Bono that we can undoubtedly say that we'll miss is his locker room presence. He was beloved by everybody at the club. You're not going to skip a beat now with Sean Johnson, because just the impression that I got from speaking to people and speaking to him is that he is a class act and a true leader within the locker room. Bob Bradley said the one thing that really stands out about him is just how much he elevates the rest of the players around him. And that part, yeah, once again, is really exciting. 2, if you include Osorio, 3 of the top free agents, MLS free agents, TFC signed. They added depth and quality depth to
Hedges
this
too, right?
team. Yeah, Matt Hedges as well. It's exciting, right? It is exciting to go back to your original question for Toronto, seeing the direction that they're heading.
Yeah. See, the Forbes came out with their most valuable franchises, and for the first time ever, our first billion-dollar club in LAFC, and the Galaxy are just behind. TFC 6th most valuable. I think 690 million around there. They bought that franchise for 10 million. So
2005.
we can criticize North
Turnover.
American football, and people do, but they're doing something right. The valuations are crazy right now.
Do you think in, I don't know, let's say 20, 25 years, maybe sooner, if MLS has the money that the Premier League has at the moment, that it can shift where young up-and-coming players or established players will start moving to MLS rather than
Not in 20
within
years.
Europe.
Not in 20 years. That's way too, like, the Europe has been the goal for what, ever, pretty, since at least the 60s, 70s, and it's stayed like that. So I don't think 20 years is going to be enough time. Maybe one day, but not in that amount of time, especially with, as we mentioned, how well the Premier League is going and how big it's creating itself to be and spending all this money and everyone wants to go there.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
not going
think
anywhere, is
that-
it?
No, the reason I asked that question is because clearly money talks. Players want to go where the money is and where the eyeballs are. And if that shifts over to North America and you see a couple established players start moving over, you never know. It's just a question I want to
It's the
put out
culture,
there.
though, isn't it? Because the seasons, different seasons, football is still considered to be a winter sport, right? And
Totally,
it's not over
yeah.
here, so that's a big part. I know Don Garber, though, said years ago, he said, we want to be the #1 league in the world, and people laughed at him, right? I tell you what, the gap's a lot closer now than it was when he said that, so they're doing something right. We'll wait and see, but I think you'll see more big ownership structures where clubs buy North American clubs, MLS clubs, like the City Group, for example, with NYFC.
See that in the Canadian Premier League
Yeah,
as well.
precisely, right? You might see that in young players being loaned out to North America. Don't know, we'll see. But there are some big names this past season, right?
I mean, it's just like that. I think we're already starting to see a lot of that, though. Like, look at a guy like Ricky Puig, right? Nobody thought ever that in this position, this market, that Ricky Puig be making his way over to Major League Soccer. Maybe he's one of those examples that you could see that could reinvigorate themselves. Miguel Almiron was another one. Jan Duran just signed for Aston Villa, 18 million.
Yeah.
Right. So in MLS, the way the rules are, it's actually structured to be a bit of a selling league right now with young designated players and under 22 initiative signings. Without getting into the nitty and gritty, it's structured to bring in young players and then sell them on. So I think we are starting to get to that point.
But do you not see Ricky going back to Europe? Like,
No,
that
yeah,
would be-
I do.
But that's the thing. That would be probably his goal as well. So for me, I think the point is the MLS, I caught myself, is not still the destination, though, where everyone wants to go. And I think that's still the difference. Europe is still on this pedestal, and I don't think in 20 years that will be shifted.
No.
It'll take longer than that.
We've got to
for
wrap.
sure.
Well, that was the week. That was. Hopefully next week's a bit quieter. I don't mean that. We really enjoyed this. Hope you enjoyed it.